There are a few topics that you aren't supposed to talk about in polite company, but we're not exactly polite company, are we? Today, we're getting honest about money, how money conflicts impact your marriage, what money problems are really all about, and how to approach money conversations with your partner without heading straight for World War III. Hey, Jess.
Hey, good morning, Andrea.
Good morning. So, I'm going to jump right in and tell you about this bomb my husband dropped on me the other day.
You know how many thoughts go through my head when you
A
say my
lot.
husband dropped a bomb on
I
me? I'm
mean,
like,
it's not any of those
ooh,
ones that you're thinking about, but it's
okay,
serious.
okay.
It's a very serious bomb. So he just casually walks into the kitchen while I'm cooking or something and mentions that he just read an article in the Boston Globe that says that a number of New England colleges, and I'm sure more and more colleges, um, are now costing $90,000 a year with tuition, room, and board.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 4 kids, and we assume they're all going to go to college. And so he mentioned that with a couple other fees or time value of money or whatever, I was blanking out at this point, that this is going to cost us $1.6 million to send our
So
kids to
many thoughts
college.
where I'm like, well, that's pointless.
I
Because it's
agreed.
not worth it. Sorry, I won't even go there right now.
No, I know. We have to have that conversation another day
Oh, yeah.
because this is one topic, this is one part of the conversation around money that is stressful, but it's not the only part. So I have been super stressed about this since he said it. But like I said, this isn't the only time I feel stressed about money. Generally, if we're talking about it, I am dissociating, trying to find the nearest exit. I'm not a happy girl.
Mm-mm.
What does this conversation about money bring up for you when it comes up in your house?
It immediately spikes my cortisol levels and my blood
Yes.
pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the topic of money.
Mm-hmm.
Legit hate it. It makes
Mm-hmm.
me feel like I have to defend right away.
Yes.
So essentially it puts me on the defense, but it
Mm-hmm.
is not a topic of conversation that I am ever like, ooh, yay, fun, let's do it. Let's
No,
talk about
never.
it.
Actually, how do you guys handle your money? If you don't mind my
Like
asking.
today,
Yeah,
like
today.
today in the present,
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Yeah.
changed a
Yeah.
lot. I will
Us
say
too.
that. It is not a reflection of how we handle money in our house today, is not how it's always been in our marriage.
Mm-mm.
Today, it is, we are very open with everything. We have shared everything,
Mm-hmm.
even with my business, right? I have my own business.
Yeah.
So there is open communication. There are shared passwords. I know what bills are paid, when they're paid. I know how
Mm-hmm.
much money is in the bank. I know how much money is in essentially everything.
Yeah. So it's
Again, I
open.
want to reiterate today,
Okay. Yeah.
that's what it's like
Yeah.
today.
Okay. So it's open, but is it stress free?
Hell no.
Okay.
And to be fair, hell no. However, if I'm being honest, it is not stress free for me
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm.
Because our history with money has changed in the seasons of our marriage, I will openly admit that it has become more stressful for me because
Mm-hmm.
I know too much now.
Mm-hmm.
I know it
Yeah.
all. And there's a part of me that wants to put my head back in the sand and pretend I don't know any of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do remember being stressed about that a little bit, but I'm pretty sure money has always been a stressor for my husband, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's a newer, bigger stressor for me.
Yeah. Um, so I am almost embarrassed to say that it has changed in our house, but in the opposite way. So,
Mm.
I have a CPA.
Yes. Oh, I
I'm
do know
supposed to
that.
be good with numbers. I started working when I was little, 14. I always, had my own credit card, bought my own car, all those things, was involved in the money. Used to have the budget and the things, right? Used to pay my own bills. Um, I don't anymore. I know
Yeah.
nothing about it.
I'm
Like,
jealous a little bit, even though I used to be on the opposite end of it, where you're at now. I don't know. I'm a little jealous.
yeah. Oh, I
I
don't
don't know that
know.
I want, I don't want to know anymore.
I know this conversation is going to shape some of how I behave around money, but it is so stressful that
Mhm.
we've been like partners in avoiding having real conversations for a long time, at least real good conversations.
Ditto. Even though I know everything, I think at one point my husband was like, "Hey, maybe we can have an adult conversation about like money and
Mhm.
finances." And I was like, "I'm going to my room. Fuck off."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this got me thinking, if this topic is this big and this stressful, we need to talk about it on Honest
We're
Women.
two couples therapists who talk about this stuff inside of our offices all the time. And then we're like, hee, but we don't do it.
Yeah, 100%.
But
That's right.
before we do that, you know what is completely free and lowers your stress, at least by the end of a quick 30-minute episode? This podcast. And
Yes,
you can
girl.
see me pointing to this podcast, right? So make sure you follow us
Mhm.
because you don't want to miss a single honest conversation. So
Yes.
wherever you're listening or watching us, make
Mhm.
sure you hit that little button that says subscribe.
Yes, girl. Because even when we start stressful, we get unstressed by the end.
Yes.
We can't avoid
Yes.
this, friends. We cannot avoid this. So
We've tried.
we have tried for many, many years.
It hasn't worked.
It has not. So we've confessed that it's hard for us to talk about money. Why do you think it's hard generally for people to talk about money?
I think generally speaking, there's a lot of contradiction when it comes to messages around money.
Hmm.
For example, I know one message I've always heard, and I actually do this in my own house. If my daughter says, "Hey, mom, how much money do you make?" How dare you ask that? That is so rude. That cost, right? We have more of that conversation, but we have grown up with this idea that it's rude to talk about money. And then we wonder why, when we go to have a conversation within our marriages, why it completely fails. Because it's
Right.
essentially, it's rude to talk about money. Oh, but you have to talk about money, or
Hmm.
it's going to lead to a lot of problems in your marriage.
Right. And if we grew up thinking that it was rude to talk about money, that means that we probably didn't gain the skill set that we needed to be able to manage money well,
Absolutely.
right?
No
We,
wonder we avoid.
because we don't know what we're doing and
Correct.
we don't know how to do it without conflict.
I'll be the first to admit that I could be a lot better
Yeah.
when it comes to money. And I wish I learned to budget. I did not
Hmm.
learn to budget. I did not study accounting.
Hmm.
I It was not something that was taught. And I firmly believe that budgeting and money management and looking at this stuff should be something that is taught at a young age, both
Yeah.
inside and outside the home.
Yes.
Personal opinion here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like without any skill, I think I always just felt like then when I make more money, money won't be a problem, right? The problem about money is that I just need more of it. But that
Right. More
has
money,
not
more
played out.
problems.
Right. That has played out.
Bringing it back to the 90s again,
Yes,
right?
you
More
are,
money,
girl.
more problem. But,
Yeah.
here's this thing that I hear all the time too with a lot of younger couples that I will see, or just younger folks in general,
Mm-hmm.
is that this whole idea that if I just make more, it will be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that we have this modern day American dream now, which is less about opportunity and much more about financial ability.
Right.
And with that, I see less flexibility and an unwillingness to make sacrifices when it comes to what we're willing to cut or where
Mm-hmm.
we want to spend. I think we've become a lot more rigid in it.
Yeah. And I think the idea is that anyone can be and everyone should be tremendously financially successful.
Yes.
A lot of times without effort or like a real job. I
Yes.
I'm not going to go off on this right now, but sidebar, I just want to put a pin in this. This is a nasty trend on social media right now,
Oh, I hate
especially
it.
like in the mom zone. There's so much bullshit that's like I stayed home with my kids and we made sourdough and we're living the life that we want because we have time freedom. Because when I was doing all of that, just thousands of dollars poured into my bank account. Ask me how. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, well, what's a fucking pyramid scheme? That's how.
No
But
shit.
there's this idea that like money can just come to you, that everyone is just gonna get it. And so we can put off having the skill. because I'm just going to like find a way. I mean, I'm trying, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to find a way for magic money to come to my bank
Same,
account.
girl.
So we've got this topic that is both deeply emotional and complicated and also totally necessary part of our everyday lives that we struggle to talk about or understand. And then we get married and now we just have double the trouble. I mean, there are so many studies about the impact of money in marriage. It is often cited as either the top reason that people get divorced or one of the top few reasons that people get divorced. And again, there's a study that talks about how money related arguments can be so much more vicious and intense than other
Mm,
arguments. But
hmm.
like, we don't need a study to tell us that. I'm
No,
sure.
we know that.
Yeah, everyone participating in this conversation, everyone listening knows. So, what are some of the common problems that you see with money in marriage?
Well, because of the avoidance factor when it
Hmm.
comes to talking about money, I think money as a topic comes up when it has to come up. So
Hmm.
when spending needs to be cut or budgets need to be looked at, something needs to change. And to me,
Yeah.
it's like telling somebody, "Hey, use positive affirmations." When
Hmm.
you're in fight or flight, guess what, folks? It ain't gonna work. Like you
Yes.
can't tell your body like to be positive when you're in this place of fight
Yes.
or flight.
There are actually studies that show that this triggers the fight or flight response in your brain. Just
Oh, it
4
does for
minutes of a
me.
financial conversation. Oh, yeah, we can feel it, right? You go, I'm normally a reasonably intelligent, engaged person. I can deal with hard stuff. But if my husband says, we should talk about spending, I shut down. And that's
I like
because money
yeah.
is tied to our survival. That's
Well, it
real.
is. It's a
Yeah.
sense of safety that
Hmm.
we really forget to look at, right? Is
Yeah.
that sense of safety gets challenged when we talk about money.
Yep.
And I think naturally it's just become really, really easy to spend money in
Yeah.
today's world. And that
Mhm.
has changed. And I can't help but even think about how different it might be. Maybe I romanticize about it a little bit if we still had checkbooks.
I
Where like
know.
you go to write a check and you're like, "Oh, wow, like oh, he paid that bill or she paid
Yeah.
that bill. Oh," and then you go to like, the what was
Your
that thing
check
called?
register.
Yes, register.
Yeah.
See, this is why I still struggle with money. Didn't even remember what that was called. But then you look at, you're like, "Oh, this is how much is left. Oh, okay,
Right.
I have to wait till next month or next paycheck to buy this."
Right. Yes.
And if
It would
you're not
be
checking Chase or whatever bank like my husband does 85,000 times a day pretty much, you
mm,
don't know.
mhm. Yeah, we also do the opposite. So there are good financial reasons to put everything on credit because you earn back
Oh
some
yeah.
cash. But because we put everything on credit, it's kind of like magic money. Like the day of reckoning comes when the credit card bill comes in. At least for me. Actually, it never
Oh,
comes for me.
yeah.
Haha.
Well, no, yeah, that's the thing. Like we fly free all the time because
Mhm.
we put it on that. And I
Mhm.
actually think it's caused a lot of problems,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest.
Yeah, for sure. So not only is it easy to spend money, but everything's so fucking expensive right now.
So expensive. And I think money conversation very much turns into a blame game for couples.
Yes.
Well, you spent this. Why did you have to do this? Well, I did that, but you did this. Why
Mm.
was that necessary? And it turns into this you did, I did, whatnot. And it's just not productive.
No.
Everybody's in a state of defense.
Yeah. And can we just call out the fact that in your traditional male female relationship, women tend to be the ones that spend the money? And
Right.
that's not about spending, that's about purchasing, procuring.
Correct.
That's what I like to remind the people that I work with. You are the chief procurement officer. You don't want to be the one who's running the grocery shopping list and buying the clothes for the kids and doing all of these things, but you are. And then what you get as thanks for that is criticism. Like when my husband says we need to spend less money, that means I have
I,
failed. I need
correct.
to spend less money. So I've got the weight of making all of those decisions and all of those purchases. And then I've also got the blowback when things are expensive. And like I said, right now, groceries are expensive.
Horribly expensive.
Clothes are
Horribly.
expensive. Shoes are
Everything.
expensive. Kids' activities are expensive. I'm the one running the card, but it's not for me. you
Good
know?
Lord, you can't even go to McDonald's anymore for cheap. I mean, it is
No.
very expensive, and you're right. And I think that a lot of women who do a lot of the purchasing for the home,
Yeah.
I'm the grocery shopper.
Mhm.
And so then my husband will see this huge number each week and it's, hey, why are you spending so much on groceries? And there's that lack of knowledge. And he knows inflation, he knows prices are
Right.
high, but he's just not doing it on a daily basis. And it's
Right.
like, no, no, no. He's like, why are we spending so much? And yet I never have anything to eat. I'm like, I don't know.
You're like, "I will kill you."
I'm like, I don't know.
I
I hear
don't
I'm
know.
failing, right? That
Yes.
doesn't go anywhere well. It doesn't go
Yes,
anywhere well.
and then, of
Good.
course, since that's the way that the conversation is kicked off, of course, then you're gonna go, "Oh, that's so weird. Well, what about your golf, your
Yes.
new running shoes, your car? What about this or that?" Right? It, like you said, it's blame game, but we're really set up for that situation when we have one person who does most of the purchasing and there's money stress, which there's just always fucking money stress. I don't care how much money you make.
More money, more problems, folks. I'm
Mhm,
telling
mhm,
you, at least that's what I have seen
mhm.
because more money gives you more choices and more
Yeah,
opportunities, which can be a good thing. However, too many choices is also problematic. Like
yeah,
TV. Nobody can ever figure out what to watch on TV because there's too many damn choices.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've just talked about when everything's going right with money, like when everything's going as well as it can without having a really intentional conversation, which is where we're getting to, it's very difficult. But then there's so many ways that money can be used, like where things are going wrong. So, like if money is used for power and control, where one partner has to provide receipts, for example,
Ooh,
or is given
yes.
an allowance, for
Ooh.
example, or where there is financial infidelity. So we agree not to spend more than X amount, or we agree that we'll check in for a big purchase, and then you roll up with a car. It is a betrayal just like every other kind of betrayal. So, money, even this conversation, it's heated, it's emotional, it's personal, it's complicated. It's so much more than dollars because we've got to realize that we have a relationship with money that started when we were just kids and that shapes our relationship with and our behaviors around money now. So, Jess, what's your money history?
People can see my face now
Okay,
too.
I
You can
have
see my
consent
face.
to ask this question. I just
She
want to be
does.
clear,
She
but
does
it's
have
still
consent.
intense.
I didn't want to answer it, but
Mm-mm.
classic avoidance. I was like, ugh, okay,
Mhm.
fine. When I was thinking about my relationship and kind of messages I received, I firmly believe that having divorced parents impacted my relationship with money. Now, I
Mhm.
want to add the caveat that it wasn't necessarily the divorce itself. So, divorced women out there who are listening to this, please don't just hear the divorce. It was the way
Mhm.
in which my parents went about it and
Mhm.
essentially the hatred they had for one another. And
Mhm.
so, my parents could not talk to one another about money.
Mhm.
My mom would send my dad an itemized document every month that he would have to pay. And a lot of times I forgot about this until I was thinking about it. My stepdad would meet him at the local Chili's and go over it.
Oh.
My mother would not even have the conversation with my dad. Even when I'm telling this story, it gives me a little anxiety because I
Mhm.
remember the animosity that was happening with them. And I
Mhm.
learned really quickly as the youngest child how to take advantage of the situation in
Mhm.
childhood. So if my mom would say no to it, I would just go ask my dad. And
Mhm.
honestly, because they didn't like each other, a lot of times it'd be like, "Well, your mom said she wouldn't buy it. Okay, cool. I'll buy it for you. I'll one up
Mhm.
your." Right. And it was used as a tool against one
Mhm.
another. I remember my mom's comments about my dad, ripping her off or not giving her money. I mean, money
Mhm.
was a very hot topic
Yes.
around me growing up, and it made me avoid even looking at it
Mhm.
very young.
Mm. We share so much in that respect. My parents had a nasty divorce. And I do think, again, we acknowledge that this is complicated, that money was the way that they worked out their emotional distress against one another. And they fought about money the entire time that they had minor children, in and out of court. And it was
Ugh.
constantly in my home growing up that we didn't have enough. And there was that blame, well, because I'm not getting enough from
Yes.
your dad. We'd go to the grocery store, and I remember very distinctly that she would say things out loud like, I don't know if this check is going to clear.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of, let's hope
Oh, yeah.
that and that's so stressful. And then she also loved to like catalog shop. And I don't actually know because kids don't know what their parents like. I don't know what those numbers look like. Maybe there was plenty of money coming in from her job and child support, and we weren't so close to destruction. And what she bought from the catalog wasn't that expensive. I don't know. But all I know is that there was a lot of tension, a lot of distress, a sense of money being used as a weapon back and forth, and just a sense that there wasn't enough. And I worried
Yes.
about it all the time. And
I
like I
did
said, I
too.
started working when I was 14, and I always had a job, and I was always stressed about having enough money and stressed about having to ask for things that would cost money.
Yes. And I remember because money was used as a weapon,
Mm-hmm.
my mom would often say no, like we can't afford that. And then my dad would then purchase it, which then, like, fast forward to young adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
I will say, and I tell parents this in my office all the time, my dad bailing me out financially screwed me
Yeah.
over and over because I never learned.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like his way of showing love. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'd ask him nowadays a lot different questions than then, but he
Mm-hmm.
kept bailing me out. But I
Mm-hmm.
think he always wanted to be like, oh, but look, I love you more. I love you
Yeah.
more. Here's this money. I can bail you out. And then my mom would be like, he hides money. I mean, it was so toxic.
It was so toxic. And then I think that we are one of the first generations of people who were able to go to college. There was an expectation that everyone would go to college, at least where we grew up
Oh,
in the
yeah.
suburbs.
Yep.
And this whole ability to get loans was really easy. And so I work with people all the time who say, I can't believe my parents let me take out that kind of loan. And having loans for school was so stressful that I joined ROTC for
You
college.
did?
Mm-hmm.
I never
Yeah.
knew that.
Oh, girl. Yeah, that's a story for another time. I ended up having to drop out and having to pay the US government money back.
Oh, I could
Thankfully,
talk
that
all
was the
day about
best
that
loan I
one.
ever got. But, again, having debt as a young person is a very stressful situation because we don't have these tools. And then we roll up into our marriages going, you're better than me. I'm bad with money. Those kind of messages become very internalized.
When I first started dating my husband, I was fortunate that I did not have to take out loans for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
It was covered and paid for. I
Yep.
very fortunate. And so when we met, we were very equal when it came to that. We did not have debt.
Mm-hmm.
However, he had substantially more than I did from a financial standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I decided to go back to grad school, well, then that did fall on me. I
Mm-hmm.
did have to take out loans for that. And then I accumulated some debt, right? So we get into marriage, and I now am entering the marriage with debt, and he does not have debt. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that can shift the power dynamic
Yeah.
real quick
It,
when it's uneven like that.
it is. My husband had his college paid for, and I didn't. I felt like as a person, I felt like a liability
Oh,
from the beginning of our
mm-hmm.
relationship, and just felt so much pressure. And he never made me feel like that. But I felt so bad and felt so much pressure and felt like I had this mark on me. And I know I'm not alone in that. That comes up all the time in therapy. Let's touch on just a couple of other events that could happen in your life when you're young that would impact a listener's relationship with values around and behaviors around money.
Well, when we talk about power and how
Mm-hmm.
money holds this power, I experienced this. I entered into my marriage with debt,
Mm-hmm.
and a year after lost my dad, who
Mm-hmm.
was not married. And so everything that was his became my sister and I's, which shifted the dynamic a little bit. Well, now
Mm-hmm.
I had no debt, and I was fortunate,
Mm-hmm.
and it shifted it. So really, really quickly. And it had kind of been talked about from a inheritance, but I mean, it kind of is yours. That's how we in our marriage look at it. Like your
Mhm.
family's is yours, right?
Mm.
But it complicated things really
Mhm.
early because we were in our 20s and I was a year into my new marriage.
Mhm.
And it went from, oh, I'm feeling this way because I have all this debt to, whoa, now I don't have debt and I have this. And the power
Mhm.
dynamic shifted really quickly. And I did not know how to handle that.
Yeah.
So loss of a loved one can be really, really a big shifter.
Yeah. And if when you're young, you lose a loved one. So let's say that your parents were always saving for what came next, and then your mom or dad died. You may go, you know, why do we save? We should live, we should spend.
Hmm.
Or like if you saw a parent have a devastating job loss and things became really tight, you might say, we can't spend any money. We need to have money saved up. It's the most important thing.
And I will say, as a woman, my history and what happened to my mother, right? My dad left my
Mhm.
mom for another woman, kind
Mhm.
of left her high and dry. And so that messaging, your parents' history with it, your family's history of do not ever put yourself in a position where you're that vulnerable.
Mhm.
That was the message I received, and I think
Mhm.
that impacts things
Mhm.
where it can change overnight. Do
Mhm.
not be vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
And that messaging, right, wrong, or the other, impacts these conversations that we have in marriages.
Mhm. Yeah. The messaging is everything. And then one more thing that really stuck out for me is if you were raised in a community where your money status was different than everyone else's around you. Like, I think the communities that we're raised in, the lifestyle that we're accustomed to, it impacts all of our behaviors, our expectations going forward. But when there was a mismatch, especially if everyone around you seemed to have tons of money and your family was struggling and it could even feel shameful, that can impact our behaviors and our values and our thoughts around money.
And the whole keeping up with the Jones,
Hmm.
right? How old is that saying? And yet it
Yeah.
still applies.
Hmm.
Also, why can't I be the Jones? Just a
I
total
know.
side comment, but I want to be the Jones.
You're somebody's Jones.
You know what? That's a great point.
Mhm.
That's a great point, my friend.
Mhm. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but for the first time in Honest Women history, we have to stop our conversation in the
Oh,
middle. I know.
I don't like it.
I'm going to make you talk about this
I
2
feel so
times.
incomplete right now.
I
I
know.
feel so unsettled. I
I
don't
know.
like it.
Okay, well, let me give you one thing to take with you that might help.
Essentially, you're calming me down on our listeners right now,
I am,
to be
and maybe
clear.
our listeners. I don't know. It could be anything. So, this is the first step to having better relationship with and better conversations around money. It is identifying what your personal history is and trying to be curious about around how it's shaped your behaviors and your values. And to make this a marriage thing, that would be sitting down with your spouse and saying something that's very open and curious, like, what money lessons did you learn growing up? And you share yours, and you see if you guys can just come to the table with a little more understanding, a little more context, and a true commitment to the idea that no one is right or wrong about money. We just both bring really different things based on our experiences and our expectations. Okay, so we are rapidly approaching the 1 year anniversary of the Honest Women podcast.
And they can see me dancing. They can see me
Yes, they
dancing.
can. They can. It's a big thing. It's a big, big thing. And as we've reflected on the last year of honest conversation, we have just come to realize that these conversations are best when they're not just content to consume, but a jumping off point for more honesty in your own life. Because honest reflection and conversation is the first step to real connection with yourself and others. And you, our friend, deserve nothing less than real connection. So please don't let the honest conversation end here. First, share this episode with a friend or 3 who needs to be able to have better conversations, insight about money. and then go off and have one of your own. And make sure you are subscribed to the pod so you don't miss the second half of this conversation.